Greetings, Vinyl Community people. It's Mike MGK Boston back with another video. Something completely different, or as they say, and now for something completely different. My Australian friends, Ben Rankins and John D at Down Under Tunage, they were doing this thread. Can you link 20 albums challenge? And I thought I could do that, and I gave it a little bit of thought, and things just weren't flowing. So I actually I had to do a bunch of research this week. I was like, Jesus, this is like homework. It was like a PhD thesis by the time I was done this thing, connecting this puzzle. You remember the Rubik's Cube? Yeah, me too, and I couldn't do that either. So this was a lot of linking up and putting stuff together, and this guy's over here and she's over there, all of that, right? So, but I managed to do it, and so I'm going to do it, connect the dots, as they say, with these 20 albums, and see what you think. Leave a comment afterwards. So we're going to start with Lone Justice. There's the beautiful Maria McKee. She was only about 18 when they did this record. Geffen was all in on this. Tom Petty, Mike Campbell, his guitar player, they were involved. And the production team, this is done, produced by Jimmy Iovine. I mean, they were all in for a debut. I mean, they had all the big guns going on this. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't a commercial flop, but it didn't propel them to, I think, what the label expected. There was an album after this called Shelter, I Have It. It's a shadow of this. It's just not as good. So yeah, on this one, standout tracks, After the Flood, East of Eden, and of course the big hit on this one, Ways to Be Wicked, and that was co-written by Mike Campbell and Tom Petty. Again, Ways to Be Wicked, the name of that track. And if you listen to Ways to Be Wicked and Sweet Sweet Baby is another one on this one, it sounds like Tom Petty's band with Maria McKee singing. I was watching one of Steve Carlson's videos recently. Everybody knows Steve in the vinyl community. And he made a comment that, 25 or 30 years after you first heard something, sometimes when you listen to it again, you find different things in it, because I suppose, in my mind, what he was saying there is your ears are more mature, you're more mature in age, and maybe clinically when you listen to something, you find things in it that you certainly didn't maybe when you were 20 or anything. So I think, yeah, so anyway, my point is, listening to this again, I bought this in high school when it came out in 1985, and listening to it again, you can definitely hear the whole Tom Petty, Mike Campbell connection with this. So speaking of connecting, and I just mentioned Tom Petty, there's the band on the back. Nice shot of them right there. Speaking of Tom Petty, look no further. Damn the Torpedoes is his third studio album. Release date on this one's 1979, I believe. And of course, there's Mike Campbell right there on the back. And, and there's Tom on the front. So yeah, again, everybody knows this album. I don't need to go into great detail on it. Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, Even the Losers. This is a good one, front to back, every track, as the saying goes. And this one, again, was co-produced by Tom Petty and this guy, Jimmy Iovine, who I just mentioned. Produced that album, Lone Justice album. So anyway, Jimmy Iovine. So this was produced by Jimmy Iovine. So I got to look at my notes a bit on this one. This is really complex. It's like a calculus problem. So this is the Patti Smith Group, of course. Name of this one's Easter. Again, produced by Jimmy Iovine. And so there's a track on this one. It was actually the big hit on this one, if you will, called Because the Night. And that's a Bruce Springsteen composition. All right. Here's Bruce's debut right here. This is 1973, Greetings from Asbury Park. So, again, this is another one. Everybody knows it. I don't need to go into great detail. But the connection here, I just connected it right there with the Jimmy Iovine thing. But there's a track on this one, Spirit in the Night. Right there, track 8. Spirit of the Night was covered by Manfred Mann's Earth Band on this album. Of course, Nightingales and Bombers, the title of this one. Let's find it on the back here in the track listing. Kicks the album off right there. So that's that Springsteen composition, Spirit in the Night. Oh, these things fell over. Technical difficulties. Bear with me. So then, Man for Man drummer John Lingwood, I'm saying that right. Played with Stomo Yamashita, another percussionist from Japan. He played on the album before this. It was a Stomo Yamashita album, not the Go supergroup here. And that album was called East West. Again, John Lingwood from Man for Man's Earth Band played with Stomo Yamashita on the East West album. Here's a Stomo Yamashita. I've shown this before. I'm not going to go into exhaustive detail. This was a supergroup with, who's on this? Steve Winwood, Stomo Yamashita, and Michael Shreve. They're on the back here. And there were 3 other guys involved with this. I think Klaus Schultz, the krautrock guy, he's on this too. But anyway, there's the guys on the back. So there's Michael Shreve. And of course, Michael Shreve had been active for several years, played at Woodstock. I think he was the youngest player for these guys, and that's Santana. And this is a live album from 1973 called Lotus, recorded in Japan. Not sure the city, I think it might be Osaka. They were on a Japanese tour. Who wasn't putting out a live album in Japan in the 70s? This is no exception. This is Santana when he went really almost, this is like fusion, like Miles Davis electric stuff. It's really far out. There's the band on the back, just the huge band. So some nice liner notes. I think this was a triple LP set if you have it on vinyl. I could be wrong. But really wild artwork on the inside of this one. Of course, in the center, that's the cover art. Some Buddha looking dude there in the middle. So again, at this point, he was, Carlos Santana was working with John McLaughlin, jazz guitarist, and they were working on some stuff together. So this is the most kind of tenuous connection in my whole 20, but there is still sort of a connection. So I connected the dots with these 2 guys. So there's John McLaughlin right there and Carlos Santana. There they are with the Maharishi guy. They're just doing some stuff, some meditation. So yeah, they do 2 John Coltrane numbers on this. They do Love Supreme and Nema right there, the first 2 tracks. There they are right there. So yeah, this is a really wild album. I don't have a vinyl copy, so here we are looking at the CD. But again, you get the gist of it. So John McLaughlin right there. And here's the John McLaughlin album. This one from, what year? This mid-90s, 1995. Of course, he was on Verve right there. And it's called The Promise. Really good track you want to look up on this is Django. Of course, spelled D-J-A-N-G-O. And Thelonious Melodious is good. That's kind of an ode to Thelonious Monk. So on this record, we have the saxophone stylings of a guy named David Sanborn, who is pretty big in the jazz world. And he plays on a couple of tracks on here. I'm just trying to remember which ones. Well, here's one right here. This is called, I can't even pronounce this, Shinjin Arui, whatever. And try to see David Sanborn. See his name on here. There he is on alto saxophone. Right there, David Sanborn. All right. So, yeah, I'm just trying to keep these in order, folks. Keep this connection going, this flow. So David Sanborn, who I just mentioned, this was Paul Butterfield Blues Band. I mentioned them in a video a week or 2 ago. And anyway, yeah, this was after Mike Bloomfield had left. I think this was the 3rd album, and it's called The Resurrection of Pig Boy Crabshaw. And he brought in some horns on this one, and none other than David Sanborn right there. Again, on alto sax. You can see that name there. David Sanborn. Not sure which one he is in this photo. It's a little grainy. I think that's the whole point. It's just some kind of, yeah, different take on the photo. I'm supposed to make it look older, I guess. But again, David Sanborn playing alto sax on that Paul Butterfield Blues Band album. And then, oh yeah, geez, I got to connect the dots a little better than that, right? So on keyboards on this album, a guy named Mark Naftalin. And he was actually interviewed in that recent documentary about Paul Butterfield. I'm hooked on phonics today, Jesus. Paul Butterfield documentary that's currently streaming on Amazon. Don't ask me the name of it, but if you look up Paul Butterfield documentary, you should see it. So again, this guy, Mark Naftalin on keyboards. Hope you can see that. Printing's a little small. So Mark Naftalin also played. This is Brewer and Shipley. It's called Weeds. And this is an album with, look at the personnel on this. Mike Bloomfield, John Kahn, who later played in the Jerry Garcia band. And of course, none other than on piano and organ right there. There's Mark Naftalin, who I just mentioned from the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. But Mark Naftalin, when I was doing my PhD thesis on this whole connection, Mark Naftalin, as it turns out, he played on over 100 albums. He was a big session player in the 60s and the 70s, into the 80s. So yeah, so this Mark Naftalin on this Brewer and Shipley album called Weeds. I mentioned Brewer and Shipley when I did that. Very amusing. I hope you found it amusing. Celebrating 420 Day a week or so ago. So anyway, moving on. So yeah, and on that Brewer and Shipley album, connecting again, there's a cover right here of All Along the Watchtower. And of course, All Along the Watchtower was written by Bob Dylan. And here's Blonde on Blonde from 1966. And who played on this album, played keyboards on a couple of tracks? This guy, Al Cooper. The name of this one, A Possible Projection of the Future. So, Childhood's End. That's a long title, isn't it? But anyway, there's the great Al Cooper. And the cover of this one's pretty wild. He had makeup artists make him look like he was an old man on this, because he was a young man at this point. He wouldn't have been barely 30 at this point. So yeah, there's Al Cooper. And again, A Possible Projection of the Future. And on this album, he had a couple of backup singers. One chick, her name was Claudia Lanier, spelled Lennear. Well, Claudia was, as it turns out, the inspiration for the song the Rolling Stones wrote called Brown Sugar. They're not playing it anymore. It's been canceled, unfortunately. But yeah, you look up a picture of Claudia Lanier. She was a real knockout. And again, she was the apparently the motivation for writing the track Brown Sugar. So Claudia Lanier was active singing backup for a few people. And she sang on this tour with Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs and Englishmen. This was 1970, these concerts, of course, with Leon Russell playing keyboards on this one. Real wild supergroup, if you will, mini supergroup. So on this, it was Claudia Lanier, and who else was singing backup on this? This gal, I've mentioned her before. This is Rita Coolidge, and this is Rita's second album from 1973. And anyway, yeah, I just bought this recently, actually. So Family Full of Soul, If You Were Mine, Only You and I Know, that she does a cover of that. So yeah, anyway, and she does another song on here on side 2 called Better Days. Who wrote Better Days? That guy, Graham Nash, right there. There he is with his buddy, the late, great David Crosby. So in CSNY split, Graham Nash and David Crosby. You know, David Crosby was notoriously difficult to work with. You know, it turns out that cocaine and handguns don't always mix in the studio. But anyway, Nash and him were able to get along, and they put out several albums together just as Crosby Nash. And this one is a live album, released in 1977. I really like this. They do a great version of Immigration Man on this. I Used to Be a King. That's a David Crosby song. And they also do a version of Deja Vu. Well, look no further. There they are, their debut. I don't know. No, this isn't their debut, but this, anyway, that might be their second. 1970. This is a really nice pressing of this with the faux leather. Almost like a, not 3D, but like, I know, almost looks like a hologram kind of thing. Nice pictures on the inside. There's Stephen Stills right there. So speaking of Stephen Stills, there he is right here. This is his live album in 1975 on his own with his band. And he does one side electric and another side acoustic. There he is right there. All right. So there's Stephen Stills, one of my favorite guitarists. And on this album, if I can figure out which side it's on, definitely on the electric side, is, yeah, he does a version of that track right there. And that, can you see that? It is Rocky Mountain Way. Who wrote Rocky Mountain Way? Come on, you know the answer. It's Joe Walsh right here. This is a live recording from 1976. Arguably one of my favorite, I'd be arguing with myself actually, it is one of my favorite live albums. And it's called You Can't Argue with a Sick Mind right there. You can kind of see down there below the disco ball. So on this one, he does a great version of a song. I'm trying to find it here. Where is it? Well, let's just go inside here. Let's see. There it is right there. Track 2. Help Me Make It Through the Night. Who wrote Help Me Make It Through the Night? And we're doing a full circle with Rita. There she is again with her ex-husband. That's Chris Christopherson, and he wrote that song, Help Me Make It Through the Night. I think that was on his debut album. This is not his debut. This is probably his 5th or 6th studio album, and I think it was his 3rd with Rita. They did 3 or 4 albums together. I have them all. They're all pretty good. I'm a big Chris fan, the Renaissance man that he was. It was a rocky marriage, and it didn't pan out, and it was over by the time the 70s were over. That marriage was over. So anyway, that's the end. This is the first artist, or the end of the list rather. So I went from 20 down to 1. Sorry, I was kind of mumbling there at points, but Jesus, it's really hard to connect the dots and kind of remember all this stuff without some notes. Like I said, I normally just wing it my videos and just rely on my data bank here above my shoulders. But anyway, I had to put my thinking cap on for that one. I got to take it easy with my next one. So there's a couple of contests floating around. I'll probably enter 1 or 2 of those this weekend. But there you go. Can you link 20 albums? Apparently I can, and I did just that. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you're feeling up for a challenge, any of you music geeks out there, you know, kick it up a notch and try to do it. I'd love to see it. So anyway, leave me a comment below. Let me know what you thought, and I'll see you next time.